Anybody out there listening is never going to look at the 2020 or 2024 U.S. election the same again.
We need new conspiracies. Turns out all the old ones are true.
These newfangled electronic voting machines.
Amazing what you can buy.
With a few bucks.
With enough money.
Mike Lindell said all this.
Yep.
He was right. Welcome, everyone, to the Patriot Project on Mugwump Media. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Wanetta.
Thanks for joining us again today. Kevin, I predict you're not, anybody out there listening is never going to look at the 2020 or 2024 U.S. election the same again. I'm telling you. I read some crazy stuff. I watched a couple of podcasts, kind of tracked some stuff down. I'm amazed at some of the stuff that's come out. Now, I don't know if you folks have seen any interviews over the last couple of weeks with two gentlemen. They've written a new book. It's called Stolen Elections. And The Worldwide Takedown of Democracies, I think, is the second part of the title. The authors' names are Ralph Pizzullo, who's a prolific author who's written about 30 books. His partner, the other gentleman, is a man named Gary Bernstein. He's a former CIA operations officer. I liked him. Boy, he was a tough guy. He definitely was very passionate about what he was doing. Now, Pizzullo and Bernstein had written a book together previously, but little did they know that shortly after the 2020 election, what a mess that was, they were approached. Gary was approached by a very brave Venezuelan investigator named Martin Rodell. Now, Rodell, of course, Venezuela is a disaster and has been for years. Let's just say a lot of cheated elections, everyone suspects. And because of that, he had been investigating. Well, he told Gary Bernstein that he had been looking at all these elections, all this history that he wanted to share with him. And of course, the three men decided at that point that they would go ahead and start looking at these things together. Now, Martin took Pizzullo and Bernstein on a 4-year journey unraveling a worldwide election fraud scheme that began in Venezuela in 2004 and landed on the steps of the White House in America in 2020.
Like John Kennedy was right from Louisiana. He said, we need new conspiracies. Turns out all the old ones are true.
Absolutely. Yeah. It all began, folks, in 2004. Here's the history. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, of course, a socialist at the least, a communist also, was facing a national recall referendum. Now, he had become increasingly unpopular, as these socialist guys always do. But what's the old saying, Kevin? You know, you can vote yourself into socialism, but you got to shoot your way out.
Yep.
And that's what happens is you end up getting stuck with these horrible dictators that you can't get rid of. But he had become, the polls all showed that he was not going to win this recall referendum in 2004. Now, he was close to Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, of course. Castro advised him that he was going to lose. He said, you're going to lose. The polls are all against you. You better come up with a plan, buddy. Well, when Chavez asked him, what should I do? Castro told him, these newfangled electronic voting machines, you should look into possibly developing some electronic election software. So Chavez decided to do it. He took him up on it. He hired 3 Venezuelan engineers that had degrees from Venezuela's equivalent of MIT, very smart guys. They said, well, when money was waved under their nose, they said, okay, yeah, we'll put together some software.
Amazing what you can buy.
With a few bucks.
With enough money, yeah.
That you took from your people and their oil reserves, that's right. The first thing that they did is they bought voting machines from Italy, of course. Then they built a source code. That's important. The source code is what has infected all of these machines worldwide. That's the vehicle through which they cheat. They also They built the software for the machines, and as they programmed and tested this new software, They perfected the theft in two ways, according to Bernstein. The art of first stealing the election. This was new. People didn't know anything about this. The art of stealing the election without being caught, and just as important, if not more important, even if you get caught, you got to cover your trail, right? The defeat of audits. And folks, that's what got us in 2020 is, everybody says, oh, those claims were all debunked. No, they weren't. They never made it past the very beginning of the court process, because the states, in these swing states, the year before had all gone in and changed their voting laws. They had brought in all these mail-in ballots. There was so much stuff that was changed that basically it just rendered them null and void. There was no trail to follow. Everything was thrown away, wadded up, stuck in somebody's closet, shredded. Who knows what happened to
things disappeared and things reappeared. And
no pictures, because they would put stuff up so nobody could see what they were doing. It was crazy. They threw them out because things were flooded.
The world was full of crazy people that thought maybe something was not right.
Oh, yeah. We all knew something had happened, but nobody could make it stick. Anyway, when the new software was used, of course, in 2004 during the recall, back to that, Chavez avoided it. It worked. Can you imagine how happy he was? He thought, yes, no more will I have to come up with lots of dollars worth of propaganda campaigns. I won't have to stage a coup. I can just get people to vote on these machines, and I'll stay in power permanently.
Reminds me of Pinky and the Brain.
I know.
All he wanted was control of the whole world.
Oh, yeah. Well, Chavez was so pleased that he gave these guys a $2 million reward, and he encouraged them to build out their company and their software, which they did. But remember this, folks. He would not sell them the source code. He kept that. Basically, Venezuela to this day is still in control of that source code. Did you know that, Kevin?
I did not know that.
Smartmatic, the company that they formed,
heard of them
is
before.
basically their puppet company of Venezuela. As a matter of fact, did you know that their home base is in Caracas, the capital city of Venezuela? They're still under Maduro's thumb. Of course, he's the new dictator. Now, and of course, they try to hide this, but like I said, they are in Caracas. They're being bankrolled by Venezuela. Their facility there has 200 engineers on staff, which, according to Bernstein and Perillo, have studied all manners of elections around the world. 20 years, Kevin. They've been in business for 20 years, and they've been studying their craft. This is a business that has literally mastered the science of election theft. And over the last 20 years, Smartmatic has built multiple operations around the world. They have their offices in many countries, too. Like I said, Venezuela is still in control, and it's basically, I don't know if you know this or not, guys, but they are basically a criminal cartel. If you look up Cartel de Solas, basically it's the cartel of the suns. They have a sun symbol on their jackets, I guess. It's basically the government. Maduro is the head of this cartel, and it is reportedly the biggest, baddest, most well-funded cartel in the world. Gary Bernstein said over $2 trillion, which is more than any of the cartels in
quite a business.
Very wealthy. And even though Venezuela is the head and the bankroller of this election theft ring, other countries are involved. Just a few they named was Cuba, China, Russia, and Serbia. And that one, you'll hear about that later.
Not exactly our best friends, are they?
No, and possibly others. Now, after the 2004 recall election victory in Venezuela, the Smartmatic election theft operation spread all over Latin America. During the early 2000s, if you look back at the election at that time, there were a number of leftist leaders whose victories were a surprise, Kevin. The polls, they were wrong. These guys got in, these leftists, and they just completely surprised the polls. Just like in November in those two states, Virginia and New Jersey.
Becoming a very, very familiar
Becoming
tune.
a pattern, isn't it? And 500,000 votes that just sort of appear out of nowhere. That stuff happens with these machines all the time.
In the middle of the night.
And what Perillo said, one of the things he said is we took our eye off the ball. America, over the years, has always been somebody who watches the stuff that's going on in these countries. Latin America in the early 2000s went wild with these dictators cheating these elections because basically we were involved in a war with Iraq and Afghanistan. 9/11 had happened, and we were not paying close enough attention and really watching or caring about what went on with our neighbors in Latin America. Anyway, you no longer had to do any kind of crazy campaigns or stage a coup, as I said. You just put these machines up, and there you go, steal elections.
A coup.
That's right. Then they decided to expand Smartmatic to the U.S. They set up an operation here, and they attempted, through corporate shenanigans, to hide the Venezuelan ownership of these early offices, because that's not allowed in the U.S. Something that America has always tried to do. We're afraid of treason. We're afraid of companies coming in, especially in our elections, that would be connected to foreign countries, obviously. Lots of laws about that. But what they did is they used their money and had some smart people figuring out where to hide so that they beat them for a while. The first time that this election fraud was used in the U.S. was in Cook County, Illinois, Chicago. Of course. It was in the Democratic primary election for president between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Hillary was expected to win. She was up in the polls, Kevin. But
at least she was once.
The results were altered. And Obama won Cook County, pretty much launching his presidential campaign, and the rest is history. During that same election cycle, they also went into the Democratic primary in New Jersey. Kevin, it's happened there before.
Oh, my.
In that vote, they got caught by citizens. They were caught, folks, but they didn't know what to do with it. They were like deer in the headlights. They'd never experienced this before. They were caught by citizens working the polls who complained to Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, a Democrat, I believe, that they thought the election had been tampered with and stolen, the machines. So she listened, and she and her staffers did some research into Smartmatic. She wrote a letter to the Secretary of Treasury in New Jersey, John Snow, pointing out that this election company, Smartmatic, appeared to be run by Venezuelans. She figured it out.
Well, there's a link to something.
She and her office also pointed out that they believed that the company was applying some type of technology to the voting machines that needed to be looked at.
I think I've heard about this before.
But guess what? Nobody looked at the voting machines, of course. Instead, they sat in their office and they sent them letters and called and started investigating them, asking them, so who are you? Of course, the Venezuelans insisted that they were Americans at the time, but they knew that the time to flee was close before somebody figured out what was going on. Gary Bernstein remarked that if anyone would have seriously looked into the ownership of the company, they would have seen, get this, Kevin, that one of the owners was the former chief of staff of dictator Hugo Chavez.
That's a threat. It's a concern.
Right?
Now, how did they hide that? They
didn't. It was in their paperwork. All they had to do was look it up. Gary Brunson said I found it. It was easy to find. I can't imagine nobody else. They just weren't looking.
So this was just in public records.
Yeah, they just weren't looking. Yeah. Again, and part of it is laziness, but probably part of it, again, nobody expected this. We were deer in the headlights at that time.
All go ahead and get raised up to a position that we're not able to do.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, at that point, they were under investigation. Smartmatic decided to hide further by buying and merging with an American voting machine company, a company called Sequoia. Now, the reason they picked Sequoia is they were well known. They had like a 22 to 24% share of the voting machines. So there was a lot of voting machines. There was a lot of business. But also, they had been doing elections without controversy for 100 years. So that could have been a smart move. But guess what? They were under suspicion at this point because they had been fingered by the Congresswoman. And so at that point, a Congressional Oversight Committee began asking, who are you? At that point, they knew they better escape scrutiny. So the Sequoia/Smartmatic blended company decided to sell to a little-known company out of Toronto, Canada called Dominion. Now, Dominion had only been around 6 or 7 years, and at the time had only run one local election. And curiously, Gary Bernstein says, it was kind of an incubator company in a George Soros space. They were out of Toronto, a liberal area, and apparently there was George Soros influence that he was able to, I'd say there's some Soros money involved in it. So now the source code is infected. It's embedded in all of the Sequoia/Dominion company machines. The machines went all over the country and could now be used in the very first presidential election in 2008.
I think I'm going to blame Andy. He shouldn't have went fishing. It sounds like Barney was on this case.
Yeah. When Bernstein asked how the cheating was done in the presidential election, he replied, with this technology, and this is chilling, folks, this really is, and we've seen this. This is so familiar. With this technology, small numbers of people can commit massive fraud. Remember, they ran him out of the place, and they went to work pulling stuff out from under tables, and just a few people ran those things over and over and over, copying.
On video, never
copying
investigated.
ballots. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Nothing here, nothing here.
A small number of people,
no standing.
I know, can commit massive fraud, which is very difficult to track and detect after the election. Remember, step 1, do the cheat. Step 2, cover your tracks. And keep in mind, Bernstein continued, all it takes to win in a presidential election in America is to take this technology into certain counties and certain states, swing states, the big counties. And remember last month we talked about that's where some of that stuff was happening, was around the big counties. You can literally change the results of a national election by flipping 3 or 4 counties. Kind of like the sniper's gun method. Boy, isn't that ironic? From this point on, the newly merged company decided that Smartmatic, the mothership, will do elections globally, staying away from America. They didn't want to be scrutinized anymore. And Dominion will do elections in America. Now, the scary thing about it, folks, is those machines are still here. Now, I don't want you to be discouraged. I don't want anyone to be discouraged right now. Don't turn us off, because now you're going to hear the good part, okay? Here's the good news, as always.
Exposure.
I know it sounds horrifying and discouraging, but this, number one, this horrible injustice had to be exposed. This was going on for 20 years, and we didn't know it.
Well,
I mean,
there was no one taking the case, no one investigating, just nothing here.
We knew there was some weird stuff going on. In 2012, I remember there was, in Michigan, was it? There was counties that only voted for Obama.
Yeah, there wasn't a single vote against him.
And there were people on the news that were like, well, that's not mathematically impossible. So they cheated in that election too. And at the time, again, we were deer in the headlights. We were innocent and didn't know. Now, Trump knows it, just so you guys know. Gary Bernstein believes that this is the reason that we now have warships off the coast of Venezuela. I've heard multiple people say that. And everybody's going, well, what's Trump doing? Well, he's trying to kick him out, is what he's doing. As a matter of fact, there's a report that said that he told him, step down, you're done. Trump is demanding that Maduro vamoose from Venezuela, step down from power. And I don't know if you guys have heard this. I tell you, can you imagine the people in Venezuela crying out for justice all these years? There are patriots in Venezuela. There are. You hear about them. I had not heard. I heard about this lady, but I didn't know where she was from. If you've ever heard of a lady named Maria Corina Machado, the people love her. You know what they call her, Kevin? They call her the Iron Lady. Gary Bernstein said she is the bravest woman he has ever seen. She tried to run. She would have won. But basically Maduro threw her out and told her, no, you're not going to run again. Not for 4 years. Not sure how he got that done. He's a dictator. I guess he could do what he wants. But this lady, like I said, they call her the Iron Lady. She is a warrior that was provided to the Venezuelan people for this time, I think. She's a Deborah in her time. Did you know that she received the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize?
That's what you was telling me.
She tried to give it to Trump. Did you know that?
Amazing, yes.
She was going to share it with Trump.
Interesting.
But she's beautiful. She's an amazing woman. She's there waiting in the wings.
Yep.
And if he gets thrown out, I bet you the people elect her because she's an amazing lady. Isn't it cool how God always puts people there? He just does. And there's a brave team of patriots, folks. Gary Bernstein, his writing and research partner, Ralph Perullo, the brave Venezuelan investigative partner that got them started on this, Martine Rodell. General Mike Flynn was in on this. And Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne. You remember him, Kevin?
Yep.
He went to all the states in 2020 trying to convince them what had happened. I think he bankrolled a lot of this, Overstock.com.
Yep.
He had a lot of money from it. And according to Gary Bernstein, their team is now working with and helping to protect Venezuelan engineer whistleblowers, several of them, who were involved with the development of Smartmatic from the very beginning. And they're ready. They're ready and willing to hold up their right hand and testify against these infected voting machines. And guess what, Kevin? They gave up the source code. Gary and his group have it.
Very good.
Yeah, the all-important source code. On Benny Johnson's podcast several days ago, a former GOP election official he goes so far as to say that he believes the sale of Dominion to a former GOP election official could have been forced behind the scenes. And you guys remember that. We talked about it. I think it was in October. It's called Liberty Vote. It was a former GOP election official that owns a business in he owns a poll books business. And I remember talking to you guys and saying, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad, but it's different for sure. Benny Johnson thinks that the sale might actually have been to force Dominion out of the voting machines. But it is called Liberty Vote. And one of the first things he did, Kevin, is there was still ongoing lawsuits against Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, who they ruined. He forced, and some of Trump's lawyers, and he forced them to drop the litigation, to drop the lawsuits. He also said that he was going to go along with Trump's plan for transparency. I just hope and pray to God that this man is who he says he is, and hopefully things will work out better the next election. And you know what? I think that's why Trump is now focusing so heavily on election fraud, and why last week he shared out legendary investigative journalist Lara Logan's interview with Bernstein and Perullo. That's where I first saw them, but then I found them on some other shows and just sort of getting a consensus of information. Now, last week, this is going to blow your mind if you have not heard this. This is kind of a final little story. Last week, a mugwump at large sent me a text thread from X, posted by a reporter named Emerald Robinson. Here's what she wrote. It's time to tell you the story about how the 2024 election fraud was stopped. Are you ready? A few weeks before the 2024 election, at Senator Mark Mullen, he's amazing. He's the only one that would listen in the Senate. And former Senator David Perdue finally arranged a meeting between Trump advisors Susie Wiles and the one man, and she never mentions who the man is. Not sure why. The one man who could explain exactly how America's election systems are rigged. The meeting took place at Mar-a-Lago. Susie Wiles had publicly said that election fraud was not real, his chief of staff, and that people who thought so were crazy. After the briefing, she didn't know what to think. She asked for a piece of cake, and she ate it slowly. Then she made the decision. Trump's team should be briefed too. In the end, the man stayed at Mar-a-Lago for 3 days to brief everyone. There was only one man who Wiles trusted to confirm it all, at Elon Musk. A call was made. The man found himself in a room with Musk. Musk declined to sit through a full briefing. "Just give me your data," he said. Of course he did. So at Elon Musk read the AI summary of the technical data, and then he picked up his phone and made a call. "We have a problem," he said. "It's true." Then Musk got on a plane to host a Trump rally in Pennsylvania. Folks, this was just a couple of weeks before the election, October 17th, 2024. Musk got on stage and attacked Dominion. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
I remember this, and I can remember looking at him and thinking, At Elon Musk said at the rally, there's always the question of Dominion voting machines. It's weird that they're used in Philadelphia and Maricopa County, but not in a lot of other places.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that seem like a heck of a coincidence? Musk was warning us that the system was rigged.
Yep.
How could the 2024 steal be stopped a few weeks before the election? The man who briefed Musk had a team at Patrick Byrne and Gary Bernstein. This man had recruited a dozen people who knew how the rigged system was built in Venezuela, the engineers. They had worked for Smartmatic and Maduro. This group of whistleblowers were hiding in a hotel in Gstaad, Switzerland before the 2024 elections. They were afraid they'd kill him.
Mm-hmm.
That's where General Flynn flew to see them. They said Venezuela now rigs it in 72 countries for the last 20 years. The whistleblowers from Venezuela had video meetings with Musk's team and Trump's team to explain the technical details of the election fraud. The most important detail, the Dominion IP addresses had been located. Remember all of these other countries that are on board? And all it cost, Kevin, was $15 in Bitcoin from an anonymous Japanese account. The relevant data and IP addresses were now verified. That's when Senator Mullen came to the rescue again. A cybersecurity team got the data. They got involved. 3 days before the 2024 election, the Dominion office in Serbia was hit. Their computers were useless. On election day, nobody knew if the cybersecurity team had been successful knocking out the Serbian computers. Everybody at Mar-a-Lago had to wait for the results without certainty. The man who had briefed Musk flew to Oslo that day. His team would flee the USA if they failed.
Yep.
They were amazing patriots.
Yep. Men and women that risked their lives and their fortunes for a cause, something bigger than them. Our nation, America, one nation under God, and God's people, and the way God works. It's amazing. Miracles.
She goes on. Imagine the moment on election day. Trump had no idea if he would win. So Ed Patrick Byrne watched results from Qatar. Gary Bernstein watched from Switzerland. All of them would be hunted down if the 2024 election fraud was successful. And the USA would be finished. Trump was upset with his own staff after Elon Musk verified that the fraud was real.
Yep.
He'd been gaslit for 4 years. This was after they won and after everyone settled down. Gaslit for 4 years by his team to drop the topic. In fact, his staff hired a Cuban intelligence asset in 2020 to investigate the fraud, to lie to Trump that our elections were fair. Now, to be fair to them, I don't know that they knew that he was an asset. I don't know that they... I had heard one of them say that they were all of these agencies that supposedly went through and verified if something was fair or not, that really it was hard to find one that wasn't corrupt. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure Trump didn't know. Folks, the evil plan is unwinding.
Yep.
Kevin, there's some scripture there. And this just really brings it all full circle, folks.
Luke 8:17. Nothing is secret that will not be revealed, nor anything hidden that will not be known and come to light. The light is hitting the darkness. And boy, I'll tell you, the exposure that's been going on, it's exciting. We're living in a time when it's very frightening. But much like during the founding of our nation, all those patriots back then, when they left their house, their families didn't know if they'd ever see them again. And we've seen General Flynn, and we've seen Mike Lindell, we've seen so many. We could list them off. Rudy Giuliani lost everything. Yeah. And all these people, these people that have lost everything. But you know what? It's not worth nothing. It's worth everything to live in a nation where we're free, to raise our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And God, He's answering our prayers. He has heard us, and He knows that His people are crying out, and that so many of us have been willing to step up. And, it's time. It's time.
And, folks, we're not out of the woods yet.
No.
Whenever, and, of course, I'm so proud of Trump and Elon. They're back together again. He knows that he needs to help. Elon needs to help.
Yep.
And what he said, we may not hang together, but what is it he said? But we will surely hang separately if we don't.
Yep.
And we're not out of the woods yet, but I think that God has provided a way.
And this is not just international. This is national. This is local. This is, it's time for God's people to step up. We have to be the light. We have to speak out against the darkness. We've got to lift up the banner of Christ. It's time for the church to rise. Yeah. And when the church rises, you know what? God is going to honor His people.
Yep.
And He will answer our prayers. Absolutely.
Yep. Well, folks, thanks for joining us again today. I tell you, I'm amazed. This is more, reading this, I just became emotional reading this thread because none of us knew. None of us knew what was going on, but God was working in the background days before. They didn't even know that they'd taken out those computers in Serbia. We had heard. Mike Lindell said all this.
Yep.
He was right. January 9th in 2020, he said, I'm telling you, there are computers overseas.
I think I'm going to get me a hat made that says Donald
Mike
Trump
was right,
and Mike Lindell was right, and Rudy Giuliani was right. You know what? There's John Kennedy. I love what he said. I'll just say that again. But he said we're gonna need new conspiracies. Turns out all the old ones are true.
Yeah. I tell you, this has been a wild ride of exposure this 4 or 5 years, with more to come. Buckle your seatbelts, folks. God's in charge. It's crazy, though. Interesting. Well, folks, pass this information along. Remember to like and subscribe also. And, we'll be back again next week. We're always going to try to bring you the truth. We're going to bring you good stories. And always, we want you to be encouraged. There's nothing more irritating than these podcasts that are Debbie Downers that just tell you the bad news and then get off the air. It's like, and why do I want to listen to you again? I want to hear the truth, but I want to hear that there is a way out, because there is.
There always is.
And to point out what's good and what's going on. Very important. As always, we promise to bring you more conversation when we come back next week, more information to keep you informed, inspired, and always independent. God bless.